Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is the second installment of the CALI Author Training Series. My name is Sarah Smith. I'm the Assistant Director of Curriculum Development at CALI. If you were here for the initial presentation, I gave an overview on how to copy a lesson from our lesson library, make edits to it, publish it, and assign it to your students using Lesson Link and access the grades and analytics. This time around, I'm going to be doing a bit of a deeper dive into the various CALI Author question types and page types, really. All right, so that breaks down to essentially text pages, question pages, and then a few other page types that really serve to allow you to provide supplemental information on the page. The text pages, straightforward. They're the presentation of content only. They do not include a question. You can think of them as the setup or the lecture. You can use them to teach the law, present your hypotheticals, discuss cases, historical perspective, whatever you want. You have the option to include various media, such as images or videos. I covered those in our first meeting. I have this big disclaimer at the bottom that essentially says we do have other media types that look like they're available for use in the CALI Author program, such as text with audio, text with hotspots. Those are not yet operational. If you do happen to copy a lesson that contains those features, it will look like they're operational, but you actually can't modify them outside of just deleting the page that contains those features. So if you need to make any more extensive edits to those with features that are not yet operational, you can reach out and contact us. All right, the bulk of our discussion today will be based around the various question types that we have. Of course, those are ones that include a question component. There are 12 different question types available. A common theme across all of them is you have to set the answer choices from which the students select. You have to designate which ones are right, wrong, and then we have these additional options for maybe and info. Just a heads up that in the CALI world, only a right answer will score the student the point. Wrong, maybe, and info are all regarded as wrong answers. And then, of course, you have to provide feedback for the answer that the student had selected. We require detailed feedback for all of the lessons that we make publicly available. And of course, for any self-published lessons or any lessons that you edit, we obviously encourage you to do so as well. This is the rundown of our question types. I'm not going to go into all the details that are here right now because we're actually going to go through these one by one in the CALI Author program, and you'll get to see them in action. All right, and then those other page types that I talked about allow you to provide supplemental information on a page. Those are broken down into pop-ups, which are accessed through a hyperlink in the text, and they open up a box on the same page to display your content. And then toolbars, which are similar to pop-ups, but they appear as buttons at the top of the page. They too open a box on the same page to display your content, and they can be set to appear on multiple consecutive pages. And I'll show you what that means when we get there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to CALI Author so you can see what these look like both from the authoring side and from the perspective of the student. And along the way, I'll give you some tips and some ways to use these. All right. All right, so this is the CALI Author homepage that you saw in our first meeting. I'm going to be jumping between a few lessons. It was hard to find one lesson that contained all of our question types, so we'll be jumping through a couple of them right now. The first one that we'll be looking at is joinder of claims and parties. I'm just going to select the little view lesson icon because we won't need to be making any changes that stick. All right, so the first question type that we're going to be looking at is your standard multiple choice question. All right, the standard multiple choice question, it's pretty much what you've seen on other multiple choice questions. In CALI Author, you have the option to provide between 2 and 7 different answer choices that the student can select from. Notice here that there are 4 options for the student. A is been set as a wrong answer, B is a wrong answer, C is the correct answer, and D is an incorrect answer. And notice that each one of the options have feedback that the student will see if they select that particular answer. So this is what it looks like for the student. Again, it's your standard multiple choice question. If I select A, that's a wrong answer. It will give me the feedback that tells me why. C was the correct answer. It will tell me that I'm right and give me the feedback that was set for that particular answer choice. All right. The next one we're going to be looking at is the multiple choice short question type. And that really is just a more simple version of our multiple choice question. Go ahead and jump to that question. All right, so notice that visually it looks different because a multiple choice question has the options vertically stacked. These have little buttons that are horizontal. A common use for this question type are yes, no, maybe questions, true, false, agree, disagree. You're limited between 2 and 3 choices. I'll show you what that looks like from the authoring side. So here is where you would determine how many options you would give the student to select from. Notice too that you can write whatever you want in these boxes. So while common uses are yes, no, maybe, true, false, you can put whatever you want into these boxes. And again, there's the feedback that the student will see if they select either one of these choices. All right, moving on, I'm going to go to a choose all that apply question type. So I want to go ahead and note here that we recommend that you use a multiple choice question or even a multiple choice short question type for when there's only one correct answer. And the reason is because we have a question type that is dedicated for a choose all that apply, more than one answer is right question. And that is the choose all that apply question type. All right. All right. So here you can see that these are the options that the student can select from. You'll notice that the student has to select number 2, number 3, and number 4 in order to get the answer correct. You can have anywhere between 1 and 7 categories, but we're going to leave it at 1 right now because that makes it function as your standard your standard choose all that apply question. We'll look at what happens later when you adjust the number of categories. So here the number of items are 4. Notice that there's only one set of feedback for a right answer and one set of feedback for a wrong answer. That means the student has to have all their selections correct in order to get a right answer. So even if they get, let's say, the last 2 correct, that's still going to be a wrong answer according to the system. They would really have to get all of the correct selections and then not select any of the incorrect selections in order to get the answer correct. So that's just your standard choose all that apply question. If you have more than one right answer, we recommend that you would use that question instead of the multiple choice and setting more than one right answer there. All right, now we're going to move to our categorize set question type. That is just like the one that you're looking at now, choose all that apply, except for that it provides individual feedback for every item. So I'll show you what that looks like just from the student side because it looks really similar from the perspective of the author. And let's all right. So here it looks similar to a choose all that apply question type. Notice though that I get individual feedback for every single item in the list. So again, from the authoring perspective, if you get the answer right, you would have to provide feedback for each item if the student gets the answer right, if the student gets the answer wrong. It's a little bit more individualized with regards to the feedback for that type of question. All right, so it's just a kind of a variation on the choose all that apply, allows you to expand that feedback, individualize it according to whether or not the student selected every single item in the list provided. All right, moving on, I'm going to go to a short answer question. And I'll warn you now that the short answer question type is probably the most complicated as well as the most misused question type. And so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on it. The short answer question requires the student to match exactly some sort of text response that you've provided to the system. So it's short, structured text responses. This is not an essay question. It really is structured. And because it has to match exactly, you really have to be thoughtful about the types of answers and the types of questions that you use this question for. So we're gonna really dive into this particular question to see the example. All right. So this one asks, what is the basis under the federal rules for bringing this claim? So here the author really wants the student to enter in a certain rule. Notice that the author has anticipated that the student might provide a couple wrong answers in terms of rules, right? So the author anticipated that they might say Rule 13, Rule 14, which is the correct answer, Rule 18, and Rule 20. So, sorry, hold on 1 second. Get someone else. I apologize for that. I had to let a meowing cat out of the room. Okay. So essentially what you have to be thoughtful about is you have to anticipate the entire world of correct answers that a student might provide, right? So for instance, here, if you will accept the number 14 and the written out 14, then you're going to have to include that in the list of responses that you will accept as a right answer. So for instance, you don't want to do a question that has a long sentence, because the different variety and ways of which the student can respond will be outside of the scope of what you can possibly anticipate and include as a correct answer. So here the author decided to include multiple tests. You don't have to. You can always just include one test as the correct answer. Again, they wanted to provide feedback for other answers that they anticipated that a student would provide, those other rules that they have determined are wrong answers. And then they did the different variations of what they would accept as a wrong answer, or what they would accept as a right answer, and what would be considered a wrong answer to trigger that feedback. Going a little bit deeper into this question type, notice that there's this drop down, right? So here, I'm going to focus on the right answer. It's set as contains any of these words. That means the student response can contain 14 or 14 written a different way, or impleed, and that will get the right answer, and therefore this right answer feedback. If you were to set it to contains all of these words, it would have to, the student's response would have to contain 14, 14, and impleed, right? It would have to include all of those together. Obviously, that doesn't make sense for this example, but you can see, you can envision an example where that would make sense. If you were to select contains all of these words in order, then you would need 14 followed by 14 followed by impleed in the answer. And then finally, you can do the negative, right, where it doesn't contain any of these words. So you can do that for both the right answer, or you can just say, hey, your answer's wrong if it doesn't contain any of these words that I've included in this list. So you can see between the number of tests, you can do up to 16, and the different ways in which you can require their response to be structured, and in all the different variations of the actual words you can put as the matching test, that this can get very detailed and very complex. So while it allows for a lot of opportunity, I also, word of warning to think through, try to anticipate all the right answers that you would accept from a student, and to make sure that they're included some way in, at the very least, your right answers. For anything that isn't in one of these tests, the student will get feedback for the unrecognized feedback. So if it's not in, any of your wrong answers that you've set or your right answers, they'll get a set of feedback that says, essentially, I don't know what you just wrote, and it's wrong, right? Okay. All right, so moving on from the short answer, I'm going to move to our essay question. Scroll up. All right, so the essay question, you can provide sample initial text that the student would see before they answer the question. Then the model answer that you enter would come after the student submits their response, and then they also get some additional feedback. So how that looks to the student without any sample initial text, they get an empty box, they enter in their answer, they select review my answer, they get the model answer that you provided along with the feedback that you provided. If you decide to include some sample text, it gives a third box. There's the sample. Student enters their answer in that middle box. Just like before, they get the model answer after submitting their answer, and then they get that feedback. One note is that the essay questions are not scored, so you cannot assign any points to an essay question. It's really about them being able to review and compare their answer against the model answer provided. So always be thoughtful about the model answer that you provided, because that's really the focus of this question type. All right, while I'm on this particular question, I'm going to show you, or this particular lesson, I'm going to show you pop-ups and toolbars, because this lesson contains both. I'm going to jump back to that initial multiple choice question. Notice here that there's this hyperlinked word facts. Here, the author decided to include the facts that the students could review when answering the question. And this is a pop-up, right? You can include hyperlinked text anywhere, right? I could decide to include a little box that opens when linked to the words, the result. So that's a pop-up. The student can open it up and close it up. I'm going to scroll up to claim 1 to show you what a toolbar looks like. Again, the toolbars are very similar to pop-ups, except they appear as buttons on the top. So this author in this lesson wanted the students to have access to the rules as they answered some of the questions. So if you open up the toolbar button at the top, it will expand to show a list of rules. And then notice in this toolbar, they're actual individual pop-ups, right? So these are all pop-ups contained within a toolbar at the top. I want to show you what that looks like from the authoring side. I mentioned before that the toolbars can be set so that they run on consecutive pages. Once you set a toolbar on a page, they will continue on to subsequent pages until you tell the system not to. So basically you set it on a page, you reach the page where you don't want them to show up anymore, and then you select remove previous toolbar buttons, and then that will eliminate the toolbars that were on the previous pages, but they will show up until you do that. All right, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and leave this lesson and jump to a different lesson because we have a few more page types to cover that are not within this lesson. All right. Okay, we'll be looking at the lesson punctuation and grammar basics for students. And we're going to look at the page type categorize single. All right, so for categorize single, the students can categorize a series of items. Let's jump to that page. Here is an example of a categorize single page. So here, you have the number of categories, you can have up to 7. The number of items, you could have up to 12. The categories are these two entries at the top, needs a comma and does not need a comma. And here are the items. So essentially you want to categorize each of these items into one of these two categories, right? So the way that it looks on the authoring side is actually pretty different than the way that it looks for a student. So we definitely want to look at that here. I'm going to go jump to the student side. All right. So notice here that now the items are essentially the questions. They come first, and then the options are those categories that you set, right? So again, there's the categories, needs a comma, does not need a comma. So now each of those items are presented to the student, and the student has to select whether or not each of these either needs a comma or does not need a comma. Notably, this particular question type is categorized single, and the single means it's one or the other, right? It can't be needs a comma and does not need a comma. It is one or the other. And that is distinct from the question type that we're going to be looking at next, which is essentially an expansion of the choose all that apply question type, so I'm going to go ahead and move to that one now. All right. So here, this looks like your standard choose all that apply question. This is how we looked at it before, right? What you can do is create what was just like the categorized single question, except for that an item can belong to more than one category. And you do that by expanding the categories in your choose all that apply question. So here, there's only one category. It's your normal choose all that apply question. I'm going to expand it to 2. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a second category, just for the sake of this example. And now I can tell the system that it belongs to one or the other or both categories. And again, the way that it looks is a little bit different than the authoring side, but it looks just like that categorized single question, and that the items come before the categories. So you're essentially placing these items in the categories. The categories are the options that the student selects from. And then here, the difference is it can belong to more than one category, right? Before it was either or, now it can be one or the other or both. All right, so that is your choose all that apply question that is expanded into more than one category to create kind of a variation of the categorized single question. All right, next is multiple choice sequence. Multiple choice sequence is a series of multiple choice questions revealed one by one as they are answered. You can have 2 to 3 choices per question, and it looks like that multiple choice short question type with the little buttons. And the choices are repeated across all the questions, right? So you essentially set your answer choices once. You can pick between 2 and 3 answer choices. Here it's set to 2. You choose your number of questions. You can do up to 7. So here's the questions, and they all share those 2 answer choices, correct or incorrect. So then you would set which is correct and which is incorrect for each of your items or each of your questions, and you would provide feedback for each one of those. And the way that it looks to the student, here there are 4 questions, is they would answer the first question, and once they do, the next question is revealed, right? So this is really great for a series of questions that like have some sort of commonality around them, right? Because again, you don't need to necessarily include correct or incorrect. Those, you can put whatever you want into these boxes. So you answer one, you get your feedback, you answer the next one. I'm doing horribly on these questions. All right, there, I got one right. All right. All right, and that's a multiple choice sequence question type. All right. Now we're going to jump to one other lesson to show you just two more types. We're not going to cover all of them today, but I am covering the vast majority of them and definitely the most used. All right. The lesson is overview and sources of contract law, and we're going to show you the highlight text question type first. All right, so highlight text, the student highlights a piece of text that you have that you have designated as the correct piece of text from a larger block of text. All right, so here's the question. Here's the text the student gets to select from. Here is the piece of the text. It could be a word, it could be a phrase that you have designated as the text that the student needs to select in order to get that question right. I will warn you, you can only pick one contiguous spot in the block of text that you've provided, right? So it can't be this part and this part. It can't carry over from one paragraph to the next. It just has to be, essentially one continuous piece of text, and however short or long you want that to be, that's fine. This is similar to the short answer question in that you have to be thoughtful about being inclusive of everything that you would accept as a correct answer. Meaning, you might decide that sickness or disease is really the key language that you want from the student, but you would also accept, or horses free from, right? And so you really don't want to make it so that a student technically selects the correct text that you would accept as a correct answer, but gets it wrong. And so one way to do that is to first be very thoughtful about whether or not to use this question type. If there's a lot of ambiguity, if there are multiple spots in the text that could be considered right, this is not the right question type for you. It really you need to have some sort of pinpoint text that the student can identify and select, give them the opportunity to get it right. But B, you can also use this feature for a margin of error, right? So here, the author decided that this is the correct text, right? This has been set as the correct text that the student needs to select as designated in this correct text box. But they've also said that 10 words before that text and 2 words after would also be acceptable. So if the student goes a little bit beyond those margins that have been set as the correct text, they will still get it right. So use that in order to allow for a little bit of wiggle room for, the answers that might not necessarily fit exactly, but that you would still consider and accept as a correct answer. And so how that looks for the student, right? Here's the question, here's the text that they select from. In order to get this correct, I would have to highlight the text, grade my answer. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to show one more question type, and that is the order question. All right. So the order question asks the student to place items in the correct order. You are able to also include red herrings. These are distractors that the student would have to remove from the list in order to get the answer correct. So here are the items. The order in which you place them will be the order in which the student has to place them in their response. And then here is the distractor. So the student would have to drag and drop the items into the correct order, remove the distractor from the list. I'm just guessing right now. I haven't actually looked at the answer. This is going to be wrong, right? So I got this wrong. In this instance, they all have to be in the correct order. Just like most of our other question types, every selection or every, in this instance, the placement of the various items all have to be correct in order to get that right answer. The only exception was that multiple choice secret question. That had multiple questions that were revealed as you answered them. Those are individually scored. I think that's the only question type that we have that has individual items or individual questions on the page that are individually scored. The other ones you have to get the entirety right in order to get a right answer. All right. Okay, so those are the question types that I am going to show you. I'm going to go ahead. I know we only have about 5 minutes left. I'm happy to answer any questions or show you any other examples. I suppose I should look at the chat to see if there was any questions in there. All right. All right, looks like most of them have been answered. Is there anything that hasn't been answered? Any questions from the group? Okay. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and show the contact information. If you ever need help with one of these question types, if you're ever just wondering, what might be the best fit for your material, we're always happy to help you brainstorm and come up with creative ways to display your question and present your question. So please always feel free to reach out. We're happy to jump on a Zoom call with you and walk you through any of this. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.